Hey, I'm Würfel and today we do a little quickie. This time we talk about the pressure pot. I received lots of questions about how to make a pressure pot and what you need for this, especially for people here in Europe, as most videos online seem to be overseas. So the parts listed there are mostly to reach in the USA. So this is everything you need if you want to set up a pressure pot. And for the parts, it's especially for people here in Germany or in the European country. But of course, you can find these pieces in overseas as well. So first of all, we start with the pressure pot itself. That's this big guy here. It has a lid. It comes with several parts. One of the parts is this T-piece here over. Attached to this T-piece we have the safety valve. You can see I can pull here. It's a spring-loaded safety valve, so a spring presses a ball or small object to the gasket inside, and if the pressure on the inside becomes bigger than the force from the spring, then the spring is pushed aside and excess pressure is released through the safety valve. So this is a core piece for your safety. As the name implies, it's a safety valve. So please don't do anything to this. Sometimes it might be not correctly set up. So if you want to run at 40 psi and your pressure pot and your safety valve is releasing pressure at about 30 psi, then it's just too weak. You can see I can turn this ring. There's a threading on the inside, so you can turn this, and it might take a lot of turns to move this a little bit. There's a threading on the inside that pushes onto the spring and thereby raising the load onto the spring. So I set up mine to about 70 psi. My pressure pot, you can see here, works at 80 psi maximum. Don't fear it to explode. This will not happen. You don't have enough pressure to bring this to an explosion, so nothing at home will be damaged. But what can happen is, of course, you have a gasket here on the inside. In my case, I made one myself. It's red from my red silicone. The original was black. I came to this a little bit later. Of course, it might be possible that this will break and thereby release pressure. So that's nothing this thing will blow up. But of course, if something stands nearby and it rips off, maybe some parts might flew away and might hit something. So make sure when you run it, don't put your hands here, because here's the gap where something might coming off. Yeah, we were at the safety valve, so please don't make anything stupid with this. No rubber bands, nothing to hold this close or anything. If something in any way goes wrong, especially if you use a huge compressor that don't automatically shuts off at the psi you want, if it can do more than the 80 psi this pressure pot is maximum allowed to use for, you definitely want this to work. So invest the time to set this up if it's not already working at around 80 psi. I set mine to 70 and everything is fine. So the next piece is this regulator here. Normally you use this for paint. So you have a bucket of paint inside. You pressurize your pressure pot, and then you have a spray gun attached to it, and then you can move with your paint and your pressure gun to every spot you want to reach, and then you can spray at this point. So that's the original use for these. That's why you have this handle over here, and this regulator is to regulate the pressure that's coming out of the pressure pot for the spray gun to have the right amount of pressure to work with the spray gun. You can also use this to dial in the amount of pressure you want to have on the inside. So you can dial this into, like if you want to work with 50 psi, you can set it up to 50 psi, and it will not let in more pressure than 50 psi, and everything is fine. As I said before, my compressor runs to about 60-62 psi, so that's my working pressure. So my compressor automatically shuts off when the pressure is reached, so I'm fine with that. So this is open, but if you have a bigger compressor and you don't want to regulate at your compressor, you can regulate with this one. So that's so far from the parts coming with this. There's also a spray gun similar to this, but with a special nozzle at the top and a second attachment for the paint to come through, but generally something like this, and some hoses and a few other connectors. You can throw them away, you don't need them. Maybe you can insert them at eBay or so and get a little bit of money back. To the parts that I bought, this valve and this valve over here, as well as this valve here in the back. You don't need this. You can also, if you want, do a plug on this and just make it blind. You can do the same on this one here. I like to have my hose connected to this, and then I still have the possibility to open this and release the pressure on the inside without disconnecting the pressure pot. At this point we directly come to the point of connectors. This is a fast connecting system. It's pretty standard here in Germany for tools working with compressed air. So I bought a connector for this. I bought a pre-made hose. I think it's 3 meters long. It has this end, and on the other side we have this end. I can show you in a moment. So these are the key parts needed. So that's so far on the outside. Now we're coming to the inside. You see, this is the entry where we put our pressure in, and this is the second part. There normally the paint would travel out, and this is a long piece of tubing here. It was glued in, so I didn't have any chance to unscrew it and remove it that way, so I just simply cut it off, because this is normally sticking inside the bucket of paint that is sitting in there, and the pressure presses the paint in this tubing and thereby to your spray gun. So the last piece I did on this, you see I have this red gasket here. I cast my own gasket, as the regular one that's coming with it is not holding the pressure very well over time. So I decided after I checked for pressure leaks on all my connections that the last thing that is left was the gasket. It was very stiff. I think it's good for its regular use, where you have like half an hour of working with the pressure to spray something. But we want to keep the pressure for 24 hours here, so we need something that's good. Maybe your gasket is already good, but I found a lot of people ordering different gaskets, ordering new gaskets, or making their own. If you already have the supplies like the silicone to work with this, no problem. You just need to flip the lid over, make sure it's flat and parallel, so nothing's leaking out anywhere. You can also see I glued up the inside, as this inner ring is just tack welded in some spots, just to make sure when I pour in this ring here, nothing leaks out. So that's so far from the pressure pot. I will list everything that I bought here in Germany and on Amazon, so you have a guide to find your pieces. Also make sure, if you work with something that is as dangerous as compressed air, that you don't do anything stupid. Don't blow around with a gun, or look into the release valve and opening it or so. None of these crazy things. Just be aware that compressed air is nothing to play with, and anything else should be fine. Make sure not to do something stupid. Don't do anything stupid to your safety valve, and you're good to go. These things won't blow up, they just might leak something. So that's from the pressure pot. About the compressor, I came up here. I have it here behind my tape rolls. It's a small airbrush compressor. You see I have this connector here. I will link it also down below. This is the other end of the hose. The only thing that might be problematic, if you have a huge compressor, the regular ones you can buy for shop work or so, they mostly came with these connectors. So there you don't have to do anything. If you do these small ones that are mainly for airbrushing, then you might need an adapter. I bought an adapter kit. Here at this point there's a special threading on this, and you need a connector to standard threading for this. I will link everything I bought for this down below. Now you know where each of these parts needs to go. And if you run your pressure pot for the first times, go in slow steps, increase the pressure, close it. Let's say you start with 20 psi, close the pressure pot, watch what happens to the 20 psi. If it goes down quicker as you want, you should definitely check if there are any leaks, and then you slowly increase the increments you test your pressure pot at, and if it holds your 50 psi, I think 40 is the minimum to work with. Some people even use just 30, but I think 40 you're on the safe side. I even use 60 psi. There's it's a personal thing how much you want to use. Test it, play with it, see what happens, see how your materials work with it. If you want to stay on the safe side, you run a little bit lower. Try a 30 psi or 40 psi, remove your bubbles, you're good to go. If that's not happening, maybe raise it a little bit higher, try 50 psi, and also make sure that you let your pieces in the whole curing time. So mostly you have the working time. Sometimes it says pot life, and this might be confusing in some points. The pot life is the time you can work with your materials. So if you have a mixing cup, that is your pot, and the pot life is the time your material stays workable in your pot for appliance. So if you have a working time of 40 minutes, you have 40 minutes with the amount you mixed up to work with it. So don't mix that up with the pressure pot here. What you want is a time till you can demold something. So if you have like the regular epoxies that are around, have mostly about 24 hours till demold. So you let your pieces in 24 hours till you demold them. If you live in a warmer space, you might be able to remove them a little bit earlier, 20 hours, 16 hours, I don't know, you have to check that. But you need to make sure your material is hard enough and the reaction is far enough to contain the bubbles. If you go too early with releasing the pressure and the chemical reaction is not far enough, so the chemical bonds between the different parts is not fixed yet, then maybe the bubbles may reoccur and they bubble out like you have a shaken cola bottle and you open it immediately. So in the whole model will be bubbles that sponge it up. So make sure you leave it in for the complete demold time. If you feel comfortable with your materials, you can try if you shorten this time, but just to be safe, it's nothing like putting it in, waiting 10 minutes and removing it. This is a constant process. The pressure here puts the gases, so the bubbles in your material, in solution, and it's only kept in solution as long as the pressure is there. And we keep it as long as the material is liquid, and when it starts to solidify and becomes hard, then it traps the bubbles inside. So these bubbles are non-existent. The molecules from the gases are trapped inside the molecules of the resin. That's the trick. So you don't shrink any bubbles, you capture them inside the molecules. And to hold them there, you definitely need to make sure to wait the complete time till demold. So I hope that is everything you need for this. And I hope every question is answered at this point here. If you have any questions, feel free to comment down below. I try to get behind them and answer them as quick as possible. And so far, that's just a little quick introduction here, as I'm just working out some other projects to begin making some more videos here. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one. Until that, happy dice making.